Sometimes life doesn't just knock you down, it takes everything you ever believed was yours. At 62, Marjorie Kincaid walked away from her marriage with nothing but a backpack and her grandfather's rusty hammer. She headed into the Smoky Mountains, broken and alone, until she found the ruins of an old hunting cabin buried in the woods. It was falling apart, just like her, but Mo decided to rebuild it. Through summer heat and autumn cold, she worked with her own 2 hands, while the town of Cedar Hollow watched and whispered. They called her the Wild Woman in the Woods. They had no idea what she was really building up there. What could one woman create that would leave an entire town speechless? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light came through the bedroom window the way it always had. Slanting across the hardwood floors, Marjorie Kincaid had polished every Saturday for 38 years. She lay in bed, her side of the bed, the left side, and watched dust motes drift through the golden beam. It was the last time she would see this light in this room. Tomorrow, the new owners would wake up here. They were young, maybe 30, with a baby on the way, and excitement in their eyes when they'd walked through during the open house. They hadn't noticed the slight water stain on the ceiling in the corner, the one Richard had promised to fix for a decade. They hadn't seen the doorframe in the hallway where she'd marked her children's heights year after year. Those pencil lines now painted over at the realtor's insistence. Mo, everyone had called her Mo since high school, sat up slowly. Her knees protested. 62 years of living had settled into her joints, a reminder that time moved in one direction only. She padded to the bathroom, avoiding her reflection at first. When she finally looked, a stranger gazed back. Not entirely unfamiliar, but not the woman she remembered being. Her hair had gone silver years ago, cut short now for practicality. Lines framed her eyes and mouth, smile lines people called them, though she couldn't remember the last time she'd really smiled. She'd been a pretty girl once. Richard had told her that the first time they met at a college mixer in 1983. She was 22, studying elementary education, and he was finishing his business degree. He'd been confident, funny, ambitious. He'd promised her a good life, and he'd delivered in his way. The house in the suburbs. 2 healthy children. A respectable teaching career that she'd retired from 3 years ago. Vacations to the beach every summer. The same rental cottage each time. Dinner parties with other couples who'd stayed married as long as they had. Bridge on Thursdays. Church on Sundays. A life built brick by brick, year by year, routine by comfortable routine. Except the bricks had been held together with something less than mortar. Looking back now, Mo couldn't pinpoint when Richard had stopped seeing her. Not the dramatic moment of an affair. There hadn't been one, as far as she knew. Just a slow turning away, degree by degree, until they were 2 people who shared an address and nothing else. He'd stay late at the office. She'd volunteer more at school even after retirement. They'd sit at dinner, scrolling through their phones in silence. When he finally said the words, "I think we should separate," they'd landed with less impact than they should have. Some part of her had been expecting them for years. The divorce proceedings had been civil, almost too civil. Richard's lawyer and her lawyer, though she could barely afford one, had divided their life with surgical precision. The house sold, profit split. The retirement accounts divided according to state law. The furniture, the dishes, the photo albums, the Christmas ornaments collected over 4 decades, all catalogued and distributed like inventory. The wedding ring she'd worn for 40 years came off in the lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon in March. She'd set it on the polished table between them, and Richard hadn't even looked at it. Their children had taken sides quietly but definitively. Jamie, their youngest at 34, had always been closer to his father. He worked in Richard's company now, shared his worldview, his golf outings, his circle of friends. When Mo had called to tell him about the divorce, he'd been supportive in the way you're supportive of someone going through something unfortunate but not entirely surprising. "You'll land on your feet, Mom," he'd said. "You always do. but the invitations to Sunday dinner stopped. The phone calls became text messages, then dwindled to nothing. Nicole, their daughter, had been more conflicted. At 37, married with 2 children of her own, she'd tried to maintain neutrality. She'd met Mo for lunch a few times in those first months, listened to her mother's careful, edited version of events. But Nicole lived in Atlanta now, 3 hours away, with a busy life and her own marriage to tend. The lunches became phone calls, then the phone calls became shorter. In her daughter's silence, Mo heard the question Nicole was too kind to ask aloud. What did you do wrong? How did you let this happen? Mo had asked herself the same questions. Late at night in this house that no longer felt like hers, she'd lie awake and trace the history backward. Had she been a bad wife? She'd kept the home clean, cooked the meals, supported Richard's career moves, even when they meant uprooting her own friendships. She'd raised the children to be good people. She'd been faithful, patient, present. Where had she failed? But the lawyers didn't care about those questions. Neither did the judge who signed the papers. And when the assets were divided and the house sold and the final documents filed, Mo found herself with a bank account that would sustain her for maybe 5 years if she was careful, no home, and no idea what came next. The small apartment she'd rented, a 1-bedroom in a complex full of college students and divorcees, felt like a waiting room. A place to exist, but not to live. She'd spent 6 weeks there, unpacking boxes she'd packed too hastily, trying to arrange furniture that had looked right in the old house, but seemed wrong in these smaller rooms. She'd gone to the grocery store and cooked meals for one, the portions always too large. She'd watched television shows she'd never had time for before and found them hollow. She'd called old friends, but their conversations felt stilted. They were still married, still living the life she'd lost. Their pity was kind, but suffocating. It was during one of those long, empty afternoons that she'd found the box in her closet. A cardboard box she didn't remember packing, pushed to the back behind winter coats. Inside were things from her childhood, old report cards, a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing, her mother's recipe cards written in careful cursive, and at the bottom, a leather journal that had belonged to her grandfather. Walter Kincaid had died when Mo was 12, but she remembered him with the crystalline clarity that childhood memories sometimes possess. He'd been a big man, broad-shouldered and rough-handed, who worked construction during the week and disappeared into the mountains on weekends. Her grandmother had called it his foolishness, the old hunting cabin he'd built himself somewhere up in the Smokies, days of solitude he insisted he needed. Mo had worshipped him. He'd taught her to use a hammer, to measure twice and cut once, to respect wood and the way it wanted to be shaped. She opened the journal carefully, its pages yellowed and brittle. His handwriting was bold, certain. Most entries were practical. Weather notes, supply lists, observations about deer trails and water sources. But some entries were different, more personal. A man needs a place that's his own, he'd written in 1967, not to run from anything, but to run toward himself. And later, built the last of the porch today. It'll outlast me if I did it right. That's the thing about building something real. It stays after you're gone. The last entry was dated 3 months before his death. Left the map in the box with my tools. If anyone in the family needs the cabin, they'll find it. The land is paid for, deeded clear. It's meant to be a refuge when refuge is needed. Mo had closed the journal and sat very still. A refuge. The word settled into her chest like a warm stone. She'd gone back to the box, digging deeper, and found it. A hand-drawn map on a piece of graph paper, carefully labeled with landmarks and distances. Kincaid Cabin, it said at the top. 7 miles past Cedar Hollow, TN, due east off Old Logging Road. She'd never been there. Her grandmother had sold the land to pay for medical bills after Walter died, or so Mo had always believed. But if that were true, why would he have left the map? Why would he have written about deeding it clear? That night, she'd lain in her narrow apartment bed and made a decision, not a careful one, not one she could explain to her children or her friends, but a decision that felt true, in a way nothing had felt true for years. She would go to Tennessee. She would find her grandfather's cabin. And whatever state it was in after 50 years of neglect, she would see it for herself. The next morning, she'd called the county clerk's office in Cedar Hollow. An older woman with a thick mountain accent had looked up the property records. Kincaid land? Sure, honey. Still listed under Walter Kincaid's estate. Nobody's paid taxes on it in years, but there's no lien. You family? His granddaughter. Well then, technically it should have gone to next of kin when he passed. That'd be you, I suppose, if you're the only one left on that side. You wanting to claim it? Mo had gripped the phone tighter. Yes, it'll take some paperwork. But it's doable. Fair warning, though, nobody's been up there in decades. Might not be much left to claim, but Mo didn't care about that. A week later, she'd loaded everything she owned, which wasn't much, into her truck. She'd driven out of the apartment complex at dawn, not telling anyone where she was going. Nicole and Jamie would worry eventually, but she'd sent them a text, taking some time to figure things out. I'm safe. I'll call soon. She turned off her phone and pointed the truck south. The drive took 8 hours. She stopped once for gas and a sandwich she barely tasted, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. What was she doing? Running away at 62 like some teenager fleeing a bad home. But it didn't feel like running. It felt like the first purposeful step she'd taken in years. When she crossed into Tennessee and the mountains rose up around her, something in her chest loosened. The Smokies weren't tall like the Rockies. They were old, worn down by time, covered in dense forest that looked blue in the distance. The road wound through small towns with names like Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, tourist traps that made her keep driving. She wanted the real mountains, the ones that didn't have t-shirt shops and mini golf courses. Cedar Hollow appeared on a weathered sign just after noon. Population 847. The town consisted of one main street with a general store, a diner, a post office, and a church. She parked in front of the general store, a building that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. Inside, an older man stood behind the counter reading a newspaper. He looked up when the bell over the door chimed. Help you? Mo approached the counter, suddenly aware of how she must look, disheveled from the drive, out of place in her suburban casual clothes. I'm looking for directions. Old Kincaid property? It's off Old Logging Road, I think. The man's eyes sharpened with interest. He was maybe 70, with a weathered face and steady hands. Kincaid property? Haven't heard that name in years. You relation? His granddaughter. Marjorie Kincaid. Hank Pruitt. He extended his hand across the counter and she shook it. His grip was firm. Knew your grandfather. Good man, hard worker. Used to come in here for supplies when he was building that cabin. Must have been 1965, 66, long time ago. Is there anything left of it? Hank's expression was sympathetic. Haven't been up there myself, but folks say it's pretty far gone. Weather and time, you know. Trees fall, roofs cave in. That's just the way of things. Mo pulled out her grandfather's map and spread it on the counter. Can you tell me how to get there? Hank studied the map, then pulled out a more modern one from under the register. He traced a route with his finger. Old logging road's mostly grown over, but you can still get a truck up it if you're careful. About 7 miles that way. He pointed east. Then you'll see a fork. Bear left, another mile and you should see the clearing. Or what's left of it. Mo thanked him and bought some basic supplies, bottled water, trail mix, a flashlight. Hank rang her up slowly, watching her with curiosity. You planning to stay up there? I don't know yet. Well, he handed her the change. Be careful. It's wild country. Got bears, copperheads, rough terrain. And no cell service once you leave town. I'll be fine. Hank nodded, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. She was a 62-year-old woman about to drive into the wilderness alone. She probably looked crazy. Maybe she was. But as she climbed back into her truck and followed Hank's directions out of town, Mo felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, not hope, but something close to both. A sense that she was moving toward something instead of just drifting away from everything she'd lost. The old logging road was exactly as Hank had described. Barely a road at all anymore. Just 2 faint tracks through overgrown grass and encroaching forest. Her truck bounced over roots and rocks, branches scraping the sides. She drove slowly, carefully, her grandfather's map on the seat beside her and her grandfather's old hammer, the one she'd found in the garage during the move, resting against her thigh. When she reached the fork and bore left, the road got even worse. She almost turned back twice. But then the trees opened up into a clearing, and she saw it. The cabin, or what remained of it, sat in the center of the clearing like a broken promise. Mo sat in the truck for a long time, engine off, just staring. The cabin wasn't just old or weathered, it was destroyed. The roof had collapsed entirely, caving inward so that she could see straight through to the sky in places. The front porch had fallen away from the structure, its boards rotted black and scattered like broken teeth. Vines had climbed the walls and worked their way into every crack, pulling the logs apart with patient vegetable violence. One whole corner of the building had given way, leaving the interior exposed to decades of rain and snow and wind. She got out slowly, her boots crunching on dead leaves and fallen branches. The clearing was bigger than she'd expected, maybe half an acre of mostly level ground, surrounded by towering pines and oaks. A stone chimney still stood, sturdy and straight, the only thing that seemed to have survived intact. Birds had nested in the eaves, what remained of them, and she could see evidence of larger animals. Scat on the ground, claw marks on the wood. Bears, probably. Or wildcats. Mo walked closer, testing each step, aware she was alone out here with no phone service and no one who knew where she was. Smart, Mo, real smart. But she kept walking. Up close, the destruction was even worse. The window frames held only jagged shards of glass. The door hung crooked on one hinge. Inside, everything was ruin. Collapsed furniture, rotted fabric, the detritus of abandonment. She could see where animals had denned, where water had pooled and frozen and thawed year after year, destroying everything it touched. She made her way around the perimeter carefully, cataloguing the damage. The foundation appeared to be stone, fitted together without mortar in the old way. That at least seemed solid. Some of the wall logs were salvageable, the ones that hadn't been exposed to direct weather. But most of it was beyond saving. This wasn't a cabin anymore. It was an idea of a cabin, a memory, a ghost. Mo found herself at what had been the front entrance. The doorframe still stood, though the door itself had fallen. And there, carved into the wood about eye level, were her grandfather's initials, W.K., 1966. She reached out and traced them with her finger. The cuts were still deep, still clear despite 58 years of weather. He'd made his mark here. He'd built this with his own hands, just like he'd written in his journal. Something broke open inside her chest. Not sadness exactly, though there was grief in it. More like a dam giving way, releasing pressure she'd been holding back for months, years maybe. She sat down right there on the ground, her back against the doorframe, and let herself cry. Not the quiet, dignified tears she'd shed in the lawyer's office or the apartment or the truck, but real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and raw and doesn't care about dignity. She cried for her marriage, for the 40 years she'd given to a man who'd walked away without looking back. She cried for her children, who loved her but didn't understand her. She cried for the house she'd lost, for the life she'd believed in, for the woman she'd been at 22 who'd thought she was building something permanent. And she cried for this cabin, this refuge her grandfather had built, for a purpose she was only beginning to understand. When the tears finally stopped, the sun had moved. She was sitting in shadow now, the clearing cooling as afternoon wore into evening. She felt hollowed out but strangely steady. She stood up, brushed off her jeans, and looked at the cabin again. It was a disaster, a complete disaster. She had almost no money, no construction skills beyond what her grandfather had taught her as a child, and no idea if she could even make the property legally hers. The smart thing, the reasonable thing, would be to drive back to Cedar Hollow, find a motel, sleep on it, and probably drive back to her apartment in the morning. Admit this had been a foolish impulse born of desperation and grief, but standing there with her grandfather's initials at her back and his hammer in her truck, Mo didn't feel foolish. She felt something she hadn't felt since before the divorce, maybe even before that. She felt necessary. This place needed her. And in a way she couldn't quite articulate. She needed it. The decision came quietly, without fanfare. She would stay. She would rebuild this cabin. She had no idea how, but she would figure it out. That night, she slept in the truck bed, wrapped in a sleeping bag she'd brought with the supplies. The mountain air was cold and clear, and the stars were brighter than she'd ever seen them. She could hear the forest around her, small animals moving through the underbrush, the wind in the pines, the distant call of an owl. It should have been frightening, being this alone, this exposed. But it wasn't. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a very long time. She woke at dawn to mist rising from the clearing and birds singing their territorial claims. Her body ached from the truck bed, but it was a good ache, the kind that came from doing something real. She made instant coffee on a camp stove and ate a protein bar, standing in the clearing and watching the cabin emerge from shadow as the sun rose higher. Today, she'd start. She didn't know what starting meant exactly, but she'd begin. She spent the morning doing what she could with what she had. She cleared debris from around the foundation, dragging rotted boards and fallen branches to the edge of the clearing. The work was hard, harder than anything she'd done in years of suburban comfort. Her hands blistered inside her gardening gloves. Her back complained with every bend and lift. But there was satisfaction in it too. Each piece of wreckage removed revealed something underneath. A floorboard that might be saved, a beam that wasn't as rotten as it looked, the outline of what the cabin had been. By noon, she was exhausted and filthy, her clothes soaked with sweat despite the cool mountain air. She sat on a stump and drank water, surveying what she'd accomplished. It didn't look like much, a slightly neater version of the same disaster. But it was something. A beginning. She drove back into Cedar Hollow that afternoon, following the rough logging road more confidently now that she knew the route. She needed supplies, real tools, not just her grandfather's hammer. Tarps to protect what remained of the cabin from more weather. Food that didn't come from gas stations. A plan, or at least the beginning of one. Hank was behind the counter at the general store again, and his eyebrows went up when she walked in. "You came back." "I did. How bad is it?" "Well, worse than you said." "Better than I feared." She wasn't sure that was true, but it felt true. "You planning something foolish?" Mo pulled a shopping cart free and started down the aisle. "Probably." She loaded up tarps, rope, work gloves, a proper toolkit, batteries, a lantern. Canned goods and dried foods that would keep. A better sleeping bag. Hank rang her up without comment, though she could feel him watching. The total made her wince. Almost $200, and she'd need so much more. But this was necessary. She couldn't rebuild without tools. As Hank bagged her purchases, he said, "Roy Brenner." Mo looked up. "What?" "Retired contractor. Lives just outside town. If you're serious about rebuilding, and it seems like you might be, you should talk to him. He knows timber framing, foundation work, all of it. Did quality work for 40 years. Why would he help me?" Hank shrugged. "Might not. But he knew your grandfather, and he's got time on his hands since his wife passed last year. Worth asking." Mo took the business card Hank pulled from a drawer behind the counter. Roy Brenner, it read. Contractor, retired. A phone number in pencil underneath. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," Hank replied. "You might change your mind about this whole thing once you really see what you're up against." But Mo was already seeing it. She'd been seeing it since she sat down in that lawyer's office and signed away her marriage. She'd been seeing it in the empty apartment, in her children's careful distance, in the long afternoons with nothing to fill them. What she was up against wasn't the cabin. It was the rest of her life, stretching out like that logging road, uncertain, rough, leading somewhere she couldn't quite see yet. She drove back to the clearing as the sun started its descent behind the mountains. She unloaded her supplies, set up a tarp shelter using rope and trees, and arranged her new camp with more care than she'd given her apartment. This would be home now, at least for a while. However long it took, that evening she walked around the cabin again, this time with purpose instead of shock. She took measurements with a tape measure from the new toolkit. She made notes in a small notebook she'd bought. She tried to imagine it whole, walls standing, roof solid, windows that held glass and kept out the weather. It seemed impossible. But her grandfather had done it once, starting with nothing but trees and determination. Maybe she could do it again. As darkness fell, and she climbed into her sleeping bag under the tarp, Mo realized she hadn't thought about Richard all day. Hadn't thought about the divorce or the apartment or any of it. She'd thought about beams and foundations and how to move a fallen tree that blocked access to the north side of the cabin. She'd thought about real problems with real solutions, even if she didn't know what those solutions were yet. For the first time in months, she fell asleep quickly, her body exhausted and her mind quiet. Tomorrow she'd figure out the next step, and the step after that. One nail at a time, one board at a time, she'd build something that was hers. Something that couldn't be divided in a lawyer's office or taken away by a judge's signature. Something real and solid and lasting. Her grandfather had left her more than land. He'd left her a legacy of knowing that sometimes you have to tear everything down to build it back right. The first week passed in a blur of physical labor that left Mo's entire body screaming. She woke each morning before dawn, stiff and sore, and forced herself to move until the muscles loosened. Coffee on the camp stove, a protein bar or instant oatmeal, then work until the light failed. She started with demolition, though calling it that made it sound more organized than it was. Really, she was just clearing wreckage, hauling out the collapsed roof beams one at a time, pulling down sections of wall that were too far gone to save, dragging everything to a growing pile at the edge of the clearing. Some of the logs were so rotted she could push her fingers straight through them. Others were surprisingly solid at the core, the outer layer weathered but the heartwood still good. Her hands blistered despite the work gloves. Then the blisters popped and bled and formed calluses. Her shoulders and back developed a constant ache that ibuprofen barely touched. She'd been active enough in her old life, gardening, walking, yoga twice a week, but this was different. This was the kind of work that made her understand why her grandfather had been built the way he was, all muscle and weathered skin. She rationed her supplies carefully, eating as little as she could while still maintaining energy. Dinners were canned soup heated over the camp stove, crackers, maybe an apple. She'd drive into Cedar Hollow every few days for water and essentials, and each time Hank would look at her with that same mixture of concern and respect. He never asked how it was going. Maybe he could tell by looking at her. The dirt under her fingernails, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she moved, like someone whose body was learning a new language. By the end of the first week, she'd cleared the interior completely. The cabin was now just a shell, foundation, some standing walls, the chimney. It looked worse than it had before, more exposed, more obviously ruined. But Mo could see the skeleton now. She could see what needed to be rebuilt. She'd also discovered something on that fifth day, when she was pulling up the last of the rotted floorboards. Tucked in a gap between the foundation stones was an old metal toolbox, rusted but intact. She'd pried it open with a screwdriver, not expecting much, probably just rusted tools or mouse nests. Instead, she found her grandfather's work gloves. They were leather, stiff with age, but surprisingly intact. The kind of gloves made to last, made when things were built to be repaired instead of replaced. She'd pulled them on carefully, half expecting them to crumble. But they held, and they fit her hands almost perfectly. Her grandfather must have had smaller hands than she'd remembered, or maybe she'd just been a child seeing everything as larger than it was. She wore them now as she worked. These gloves that had handled the same wood she was handling, that had built what she was trying to rebuild. It felt like a benediction, like he was there with her, guiding her hands, but knowing she had to rebuild and knowing how to rebuild were very different things. Mo stood in the empty cabin shell on the 8th day and faced the reality she'd been avoiding. She had no idea what she was doing. She could clear debris, sure, but actual construction, framing walls, building a roof, making it square and level and sound. She'd watched her grandfather work when she was young, had helped him hold boards and hand him nails. But that was 50 years ago, and she'd been a child paying attention the way children do, partially, distractedly. She needed help. The thought rankled. She'd come up here to do this herself, to prove she could. Asking for help felt like admitting weakness, admitting she wasn't capable. But pride wouldn't build a cabin. And if she tried to do this without knowledge, she'd waste materials she couldn't afford to waste. Make mistakes that could be dangerous, maybe even hurt herself. That evening, she pulled out the business card Hank had given her. Roy Brenner. She had cell service down by the logging road entrance, about a quarter-mile from the clearing. She drove the truck down there and dialed the number, her heart beating faster than made sense, for a simple phone call. He answered on the third ring. Brenner. Mr. Brenner, my name is Marjorie Kincaid. Hank Pruitt at the general store gave me your number. I'm rebuilding my grandfather's cabin up past Cedar Hollow, and I could use some advice. If you have time, I can pay you. That last part was a lie. She couldn't really pay him, not properly. But she had to offer. There was a long pause. Then Walter Kincaid's granddaughter. Yes, sir, another pause. Where's the cabin? About 7 miles up Old Logging Road, the one he built in the 60s. I know it. Helped him source some of the timber back then. I was just starting out working for my father's mill. His voice was rough, aged, but steady. What kind of shape is it in? Honestly, it's mostly collapsed. I've cleared it down to the foundation and some wall sections. But I don't really know what I'm doing. I can work. I'm not afraid of that. But I need to learn. She heard him breathing on the other end, considering. Then I'll come take a look. Tomorrow afternoon. No promises beyond that, thank you. Really, thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said, echoing Hank's words. You might not like what I have to tell you. He hung up before she could respond. Mo drove back to the clearing with her stomach in knots. What if he told her it was hopeless, that the cabin couldn't be rebuilt, that she was wasting her time? What if he laughed at her presumption? A 62-year-old woman with soft hands and no skills, thinking she could do this. But when she climbed out of the truck and stood in the clearing, looking at the cabin shell silhouetted against the darkening sky, she felt that same certainty she'd felt the first day. This was right. This was necessary. Whatever Roy Brenner told her tomorrow, she'd figure out a way forward. That night, she lay in her sleeping bag and thought about her old life. About the house that was sold now, probably repainted and rearranged by its new owners. About Richard, who was maybe already dating someone, moving on as if 40 years could be erased like pencil marks. About Nicole and Jamie, who'd called once each since she'd left, and both times she'd kept the conversations brief and vague. I'm fine. I'm just taking some time. I'll be in touch soon. She couldn't explain to them what she was doing because she barely understood it herself. How could she tell her daughter, who had a beautiful home and a stable marriage and a life that made sense, that she was living in a tarp shelter in the Tennessee woods, trying to rebuild a cabin that had been dead for longer than her children had been alive? They'd worry. They'd try to talk her into coming home. They'd see it as a breakdown instead of what it was, a breakthrough. The stars were out again, infinite and cold and indifferent. Mo closed her eyes and let the sounds of the forest settle over her. An owl called somewhere close by. Small creatures rustled in the underbrush. The wind moved through the pines with a sound like distant water. These were good sounds, real sounds. The sounds of a world that existed without lawyers or divorce papers or houses sold to strangers. Tomorrow, Roy Brenner would come. Tomorrow, she'd learn whether this impossible thing she was trying to do was actually possible. But tonight, she was just a woman sleeping under the stars with her grandfather's gloves beside her and a ruined cabin waiting to be reborn. That was enough. For now, that was enough. Roy Brenner arrived the next afternoon in an old pickup truck that had seen better days but was clearly well maintained. He was a tall man, lean in the way of people who'd done physical work their whole lives, with white hair and a weathered face that made him look anywhere between 65 and 75. He climbed out slowly, favoring his left knee, and stood looking at the cabin for a long moment before acknowledging Mo. "Well," he said finally. "You weren't exaggerating." Mo had cleaned herself up as much as she could, washed her face and hands in cold water from a jug, changed into her least dirty shirt. But she was still obviously living rough, and she saw him take that in with a quick assessing glance. "I know it's bad," she said, "but the foundation is solid, and some of the wall logs are still good." Roy walked the perimeter the way she had that first day, testing stones in the foundation with his boot, running his hands over the remaining logs, squatting down to sight along what had been the floor level. Mo followed a few steps behind, trying to read his expression. It was carefully neutral, the face of a man who'd learned not to show what he was thinking until he'd thought it all the way through. After 10 minutes, he returned to where she was standing. "Foundation is good, you're right about that. Your grandfather knew what he was doing there. These logs," he gestured at the standing walls, "about half are salvageable. The rest need to go. Roof is a complete rebuild. Floor joists, most of them are gone. You'll need new windows, new door, new roof material, so it can be rebuilt." He looked at her with sharp blue eyes. "Anything can be rebuilt if you have enough money and time. Question is, do you have either?" Mo met his gaze steadily. "I have time. Money is tight. But I'll figure it out. You planning to do the work yourself?" "I don't have much choice. You know how to frame a wall, install joists, cut a proper roof pitch?" "No, but I can learn." Something shifted in his expression, not quite approval, but recognition, like he was seeing something he understood. He pulled a tape measure from his belt and handed it to her. "Show me how you'd measure this wall for replacement." Mo took the tape measure, her hands steadier than she felt. She extended it along the standing wall, called out the measurement, checked it twice the way her grandfather had taught her. Roy nodded. Again, the north wall. They went through each wall, then the distance between posts, the height from foundation to where the roof line should be. She made mistakes, forgot to account for the log width on one measurement, got the angles wrong on another. But Roy corrected her patiently without condescension, treating her like a student worth teaching rather than a foolish woman playing at construction. Finally he said, "You're starting from scratch, basically. Going to take months, maybe a year. Hard physical labor every day. You up for that?" "Yes, why?" The question was direct, curious. "You could take what money you have, rent a decent place in town. Get a job if you need one. Why this?" Mo looked at the cabin, at the clearing, at the mountains rising beyond. How could she explain it? That she'd lost everything that was supposed to matter and found it hadn't mattered the way she thought. That she needed to build something that was hers, really hers, that couldn't be divided or taken away. That this felt like the only honest thing she'd done in years. "Because I need to," she said finally. "I don't have a better reason than that," Roy nodded slowly. "That's the only reason that matters." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'll teach you. Not going to do it for you. My back can't take that kind of work anymore. But I'll show you how. You supply the labor, I'll supply the knowledge. No charge." Mo felt something loosen in her chest. "I can't ask you to do that for nothing. You didn't ask. I'm offering. Your grandfather helped me once, long time ago. Rented me materials when I was starting out, didn't ask for payment until I could afford it. Figure I owe the family." He pulled a small notebook from his shirt pocket and a pencil stub. "First thing we do is make a proper plan. Can't just start nailing boards together and hope." "Come on." They spent the next 2 hours with Roy sketching and explaining. He drew out the basic structure, posts and beams, wall framing, roof pitch. He explained load-bearing versus non-load-bearing walls, how to calculate board feet, what kind of wood to use where. Mo filled pages in her notebook with measurements and terminology she only half understood, but knew she'd need to learn. "You got a way to mill lumber?" Roy asked. "There's a sawmill about 20 miles north. I priced it out." "It's expensive," Roy made a note. "I'll talk to them. Might be able to work something out. Meantime, you need to finish clearing the site completely. Then we'll start with the floor system. That's your foundation for everything else." Before he left, he went to his truck and returned with a carpenter's square, a simple L-shaped metal tool. "Keep this. Your grandfather borrowed it back in '66, never returned it. Seems right you should have it now." He showed her how to use it, how to check if corners were true, how to mark angles. 90 degrees. That's the magic number. Everything builds from there. After Roy drove away, Mo sat on a stump with the carpenter's square in her hands and cried again. But these were different tears, gratitude, relief, maybe even hope. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had help, knowledge, a path forward. Over the next 2 weeks, she worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She finished clearing the site completely, created level ground for the floor system, sorted the salvageable logs from the unusable ones. Roy came twice more, checked her progress, corrected her mistakes, taught her new skills. How to drive a nail properly, how to check for level, how to read wood grain and know where it would split. Between his visits, Mo practiced. She built small projects, a table for her camp, a bench, a simple frame for testing joints. Some fell apart, some held. She learned from both. She also discovered on a cool morning when she was pulling up the last of the old floor supports, an old battery-powered radio buried in the debris. It was coated in rust and dirt, but when she cleaned it off and tried new batteries, it crackled to life. The reception was terrible, mostly static, but she could get one station, a classical music program from Knoxville. She kept it on while she worked, this small connection to the world beyond the clearing. Beethoven and Brahms, accompanying her measuring and sawing. At night, she'd sit by her camp stove and update her notebook with the day's progress and lessons. She was starting to think in terms of joists and studs, pitches and spans. The language of building was becoming her language. One evening she noticed someone watching from the tree line. A figure, too small to be an adult. When Mo looked directly, they disappeared. She thought about calling out, but decided against it. The mountains held their own kind of life, their own rhythms. If someone needed to watch, let them watch. The next morning she found something new, a small bracelet made of woven threads, hung on a nail she'd driven into one of the standing wall posts. The threads were different colors, blue and green and red, twisted together in a simple pattern. Someone had been here. Someone had left a gift. Mo left the bracelet where it was, a silent acknowledgement. The clearing didn't feel quite so lonely anymore. That afternoon Roy came with news. Sawmill will give you a discount if you help with milling. Hard work, but you'd save money. When do I start? Tomorrow, if you want, Mo nodded. Tomorrow, then. Another step forward, another skill to learn. The cabin was still a ruin, still months away from being habitable. But it was less of a ruin than it had been 2 weeks ago. And Mo was less broken than she'd been when she arrived. That counted for something. That counted for a lot. Summer settled over the mountains with a weight Mo felt in every breath. The air grew thick and humid, the kind of heat that made her clothes stick to her skin by mid-morning. She worked earlier now, starting at dawn when the air was still cool, then resting through the worst heat of midday, resuming in late afternoon. The sawmill work had been brutal, but educational. 3 days a week she'd drive to the mill and spend 6 hours helping move lumber, stack boards, clear sawdust. In exchange, they gave her a 30% discount on materials and taught her things Roy couldn't. How to read wood quality, how to identify different species, what made a board worth using versus firewood. Her body adapted. The soft suburban flesh melted away, replaced by lean muscle. Her hands became as calloused as any carpenter's. With Roy's guidance, she'd rebuilt the floor system. It had taken 3 weeks of careful measuring, cutting, and installation. Joists laid across the foundation at 16-inch intervals, checked and rechecked for level. Plywood subfloor screwed down tight. When Roy finally stood on the completed floor and declared it sound, Mo had felt a pride that rivaled anything from her teaching career. This was real. This was lasting. Now she was working on the wall frames. Roy had shown her how to build them flat on the ground, bottom plate, top plate, studs in between. How to lift them into place and brace them true. How to tie them together at the corners so the whole structure would act as one unit. The work required precision. She was still learning. Twice she'd had to disassemble entire walls because they weren't square. But Roy never showed frustration, just pointed out the mistake and helped her understand how to fix it. Measure twice, cut once, he'd say. Your grandfather's favorite phrase, I remember, Mo would reply. And she did. That voice from childhood, patient and certain, teaching her that good work took time. It was during the 4th week of wall framing that she saw the girl again. Mo was carrying a long 2x4 from her lumber stack to the cabin, walking backward to keep it balanced. when she turned, and there was a teenager standing at the edge of the clearing, maybe 16, thin and tall, wearing jeans and an oversized flannel shirt. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and watchful eyes. Mo set down the board carefully. "Hello." The girl didn't run, but she looked ready to. "Hi, are you the one who left the bracelet?" A slight nod. "It's beautiful." "Thank you." Mo gestured at the cooler where she kept her water and lunch. "You want something to drink?" "It's hot." The girl hesitated, then moved forward cautiously like a wild animal testing whether it was safe. She took a water bottle Mo offered and drank half of it in one long pull. Up close, Mo could see she was malnourished, not starving but not getting enough. Her cheekbones were too prominent, her wrists too thin. "I'm Mo," she said. "What's your name?" "Shelby. You live around here?" "Down in Cedar Hollow, with my grandmother." Shelby looked at the cabin, at the walls rising from the foundation. "You're really building it." "I'm trying to." "It's slow going." "Why?" It was the same question Roy had asked, the same question she'd asked herself 100 times. "Because I need to build something. Something that's mine." Shelby seemed to understand that in a way that suggested she needed to build something too. Can I help?" Mo considered. The girl was young, probably should be in school, though it was summer now. She didn't know anything about her circumstances, but she recognized that look in Shelby's eyes. Loneliness, hunger for purpose, a need to be somewhere other than wherever home was. "You know how to use a tape measure?" "I can learn those words again." The same ones Mo had said to Roy. "All right then, come on." For the next 2 hours, Mo taught Shelby the basics. How to read a tape measure, how to mark a board, how to hold it steady while someone else cut. Shelby was quiet but attentive, asked good questions, didn't complain about the heat or the work. When Mo finally called it a day, Shelby helped put away tools without being asked. "You can come back tomorrow if you want," Mo said. "I work mornings and late afternoons." "You're welcome any time." Shelby nodded, handed back the water bottle, and disappeared into the trees as silently as she'd appeared. The next day, she was back. And the day after that, a routine developed. Shelby would arrive mid-morning, work alongside Mo for a few hours, then vanish again. She talked more as the days passed, small details emerging like light through clouds. Her mother was around but not reliable. Drugs, though Shelby didn't use that word, just said she's got problems. Her father was long gone. Her grandmother was doing her best, but was old and tired. Shelby spent most of her time in the woods, walking the mountain trails, avoiding home except to sleep. Mo didn't pry. She just offered steady work and steady presence, the same things Roy had given her, and Shelby responded to it. She learned quickly how to hold a level, how to drive nails straight, how to check if a wall was plumb. She made mistakes, but fewer each day, and the loneliness in her eyes eased slightly when she was working. The walls went up faster, with 2 sets of hands. By mid-July, all 4 walls were standing and tied together. The cabin had a shape again, a clear definition of inside and outside. Mo stood in what would be the main room and looked up at where the roof would go, and for the first time could really see it, whole, finished. "Real. It's going to be beautiful," Shelby said quietly beside her. "It will. Thanks to help from people like you and Roy." "Why's Roy helping you?" "My grandfather helped him once. He's returning the favor." Shelby was quiet for a moment. "Then, what are you going to do with it?" "When it's done." Mo had been thinking about that question more and more. At first, the answer had been simple. She'd live here, escape the life that had broken her. But as the cabin took shape, the answer was changing. "I'm not entirely sure yet. But I think it's meant to be a place where people can come when they need somewhere to go. A refuge, like a shelter?" "Sort of, not officially. Just a place." Mo looked at Shelby. "Why?" "Just wondering." But something in her expression said the question wasn't idle. "My mom got arrested last night, DUI. I don't know what happens now." Mo felt something tighten in her chest. "Where are you staying?" "With my grandmother still. But she's talking about sending me to my aunt's in Knoxville. I don't want to go there. I want to stay here." "Here meaning Cedar Hollow?" "Here meaning—" Shelby gestured at the clearing, the cabin. "I could help more. I could work every day. I won't be in the way. And there it was. The question Mo hadn't expected to face so soon. A 16-year-old girl asking for sanctuary before the sanctuary was even built. Every reasonable part of her knew this was complicated. There were legal issues, child welfare concerns, liability. She couldn't just take in a minor, especially one in crisis. That wasn't how things worked. But looking at Shelby's face, seeing the desperation barely held in check, Mo remembered what it felt like to have nowhere to go, to watch your life collapse and have no solid ground beneath you. She'd been 62 when it happened to her, with resources and options even in her devastation. Shelby was 16 with nothing. "Let me talk to your grandmother," Mo said finally, "and we'll figure something out. You're not going anywhere you don't want to go if I can help it." Shelby's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "Thank you." That evening, Mo drove into Cedar Hollow and found Shelby's grandmother's house, a small, worn bungalow on the edge of town. The grandmother, a tired woman in her 70s named Louise, invited her in and listened as Mo explained who she was and what she was building. "Shelby's been talking about you," Louise said. "Says you're teaching her carpentry. She's a good student." "A hard worker," Louise sighed. "Her mother is getting treatment finally, but it's a 90-day program. I can't handle a teenage girl on my own. I love her, but I'm too old, too tired. My daughter in Knoxville offered to take her, but Shelby doesn't know those cousins. Doesn't want to leave. What if she stayed here? Not with me exactly, but nearby. She could keep staying with you at night, but spend her days with me learning a trade. I'd make sure she's safe, fed, occupied." Louise studied Mo's face for a long moment. "You really building that old cabin?" "I am. It's about half done. And when it's finished, I'm going to make it a place where women can stay when they need somewhere to go. Not a business, not a formal shelter, just a refuge." Something shifted in Louise's expression. "My daughter, Shelby's mother, she needed a place like that years ago. Before things got bad. Might have made a difference." She nodded slowly. "All right, Shelby can work with you. But she comes home at night, and if there's any trouble, any concern at all, we revisit this. Understood?" "Understood." They shook hands like it was a contract, which it was. The most important kind. The unwritten ones, built on trust and hope and shared understanding of how hard life could be. When Mo told Shelby the next morning, the girl's face transformed. For just a moment, she looked young and unguarded, like the child she still was underneath the armor. "Really?" "Really. Now come on, we've got roof framing to figure out." They worked side by side as the summer heat built and the cabin grew more whole. And Mo realized that she'd already begun creating what she'd intended, a place of refuge, a sanctuary. Not someday when the building was complete, but right now in the work itself, in the offering of purpose and presence to someone who desperately needed both. The cabin was rising. And so, perhaps, were they. August brought afternoon thunderstorms that rolled through the mountains with dramatic speed, turning the sky dark and the air electric before unleashing torrents of rain. Mo and Shelby learned to read the weather, to watch for the building clouds and secure their work before the storms hit. They'd sit under Mo's tarp shelter while rain hammered the clearing, the incomplete cabin standing open to the sky, water sheeting off the walls they'd built. "We need to get the roof on soon," Roy said one afternoon, surveying the water pooling on the new floor. "Wood can take some weather, but not like this, not constant." He was right. The walls were up, properly braced and tied together, but without a roof they were vulnerable. Mo had been putting off this phase because it seemed impossibly complex, calculating angles, cutting rafters, making everything meet at the ridge beam with precision. But there was no avoiding it anymore. Roy spent an entire day teaching them roof geometry, drawing diagrams in Mo's notebook until she could see how the pieces fit together. Ridge beam at the peak, rafters sloping down to meet the top plates of the walls, collar ties to keep the rafters from spreading. It was like a puzzle, where every piece had to be exactly right, or the whole structure would fail. "Your grandfather did a hip roof," Roy said, looking at old photos Mo had found in the metal toolbox. "More complex, but sheds water better. You could do a simple gable instead, easier to build, but Mo studied the photo. The hip roof gave the cabin a certain elegance, a completeness. "I want to do it the way he did it," Roy smiled slightly. "Stubborn. Like him." He pulled out his calculator. "All right then. Let's figure out the math." The roof became their focus. They spent 2 weeks just cutting and fitting rafters, working with precision that made Mo's head ache. Each piece had to be identical to its mate, angles perfect, lengths exact. Shelby proved to have a talent for the mathematical side. She could calculate rise and run faster than Mo, could see the geometry in 3 dimensions. "I'm good at math," she admitted. "Only subject I don't fail." "You fail your other subjects?" Mo asked, not accusingly, just curious. Shelby shrugged. "Hard to focus when things at home are bad. Teachers don't really care anyway." "I was a teacher," Mo said quietly. "And I cared. A lot." "What'd you teach?" "3rd grade. For 34 years. Why'd you quit?" "Retired." "Then life changed." Mo didn't elaborate and Shelby didn't push. They developed a comfortable rhythm, working side by side, talking when it felt natural, letting silence fill the spaces when it didn't. The first section of roof went up on a breathlessly hot morning in late August. Roy supervised while Mo and Shelby lifted the ridge beam into place, braced it, then began attaching rafters one by one. It was terrifying work, balancing on ladders, working at heights, knowing that a mistake could mean someone getting hurt. But it was also exhilarating. With each rafter secured, the cabin took on more definition, more reality. They worked through the heat, through afternoon storms, through days when Mo's body screamed for rest, but her mind pushed forward. Shelby proved fearless on the ladders, scrambling up and down with tools, checking measurements, never showing fear even when the height made Mo's knees weak. By early September, the roof framing was complete. They covered it with plywood sheathing. Then Roy helped them install metal roofing, the same kind Mo's grandfather had used, corrugated steel that would last for decades. The sound of rain on that roof, the first time a storm came through after it was finished, was one of the most satisfying sounds Mo had ever heard. They stood inside the cabin dry for the first time and grinned at each other like kids who'd just built the best fort in the world. "It's real now," Shelby said, looking up at the underside of the roof. "It is," Mo agreed. And it was. Not finished. They still needed windows, a door, interior walls, a wood stove, 1,000 other things. But it was undeniably a cabin now. It had good bones. It would stand. Word had spread through Cedar Hollow about what Mo was building. The wild woman in the woods had become a topic of conversation at the diner, at the general store, at church on Sundays. Some people thought she was admirable. Some thought she was crazy. Most just found her curious. A woman in her 60s, living rough in the mountains, building a cabin with her bare hands. Hank mentioned it one afternoon when Mo stopped by for supplies. "Town council's been asking questions about what you're planning to do with the place." Mo felt a chill despite the heat. "What kind of questions?" "Legal stuff, zoning, whether you're building a residence or something commercial, whether you've got permits." He looked uncomfortable. "I don't think they can do anything about it. It's your land. You're not breaking any laws I know of. But they're watching." "Let them watch," Mo said, with more confidence than she felt. But that night, lying in her sleeping bag under the stars, she still slept outside. The cabin not yet habitable, she worried. She'd been so focused on the physical act of building that she hadn't thought about legal implications. What if they shut her down? What if there were regulations she'd violated? She had no money for lawyers, no ability to fight bureaucratic battles. Shelby must have sensed her worry the next day. "What's wrong?" Mo told her about Hank's warning. Shelby's face darkened. "They're going to try to stop you. Maybe, I don't know, because it's for women. Because you're helping people like my mom." Shelby's voice was tight with anger. "They'd rather we just go away, be quiet. Not need anything?" Mo looked at this fierce, damaged girl who'd found refuge in a half-built cabin and a simple offer of work and presence. "Then we don't let them stop us. We finish this. We make it undeniable." Over the next weeks, they worked with renewed urgency. Windows went in, salvaged from a building demolition Roy knew about, old but still functional. Mo learned to cut glass, install sashes, caulk seams. The front door was built from reclaimed barn wood, heavy and solid, hung on iron hinges Roy fabricated in his workshop. Interior walls went up, dividing the space into a main room, a small bedroom, a corner for a kitchen. Shelby brought things from her grandmother's house, curtains that didn't fit Louise's windows anymore, an old table that had been in the garage, mismatched chairs. Mo found a wood stove at a salvage yard, small but efficient, and Roy helped install it with proper clearances and a chimney that extended through the roof. By late September, with fall colors beginning to touch the trees, the cabin was nearly habitable. It wasn't fancy. The floor was bare plywood, the walls uninsulated, the furniture salvaged and mismatched. But it was solid, dry, safe. It had a working stove for heat and cooking. It had a sleeping loft Shelby had helped frame. It had windows that let in light and a door that locked. Mo spent her first night inside on a cool evening in early October. She lay on a sleeping pad on the floor, listening to the wind outside and the creaks of new wood settling, and felt a peace she hadn't known existed. This place, this thing she'd built with her own hands, with help from people who'd become friends, it was hers, really, truly hers. The next morning she woke to find something tucked in the doorframe. A folded piece of paper, held in place with a small stone. She unfolded it carefully. In careful teenage handwriting it read, "Thank you for showing me I don't have to be broken forever." Shelby Mo sat on the front step, the new porch she and Shelby had built just last week, and read the note again and again. This was why she'd done this. Not just for herself, though that had been part of it, but for this, the chance to show someone else that rebuilding was possible, that you could take ruins and make them whole again. She tucked the note in her pocket and went to start the day's work. There was still so much to do, but the foundation was laid, the walls were standing, the roof was keeping out the rain. The rest was details, important details, but details nonetheless. The cabin stood, and so did she, and that was everything. The discovery came on a grey October morning when Mo was installing the last of the interior flooring. The plan was simple. Cover the plywood subfloor with wide pine boards Roy had helped her source from the sawmill. They'd acclimate the wood for a week, then lay it board by board, working from one corner to the other. Mo was measuring the space near the stone fireplace, checking how the boards would fit around the irregular stones, when she noticed something odd. One of the foundation stones seemed loose, rocking slightly when she pressed it. She rocked it again, testing. It wasn't part of the load-bearing structure. It was set back slightly, in the corner where the fireplace met the wall. Almost decorative, almost. She worked it free carefully, the old mortar crumbling. Behind it was a gap, deliberately created, and in that gap, wrapped in oilcloth, was a metal box. Mo pulled it out with trembling hands. It was about the size of a shoebox, made of tin, sealed with wax around the edges. Not rust-resistant, but the oilcloth and the protected location had kept it relatively dry. Her grandfather's work? It had to be. But why hide a box in the wall? She carried it outside into better light, sat on the porch step, and carefully broke the wax seal. The lid resisted, then opened with a soft pop. Inside were papers, old papers, photographs, letters, all carefully preserved. The photographs were black and white, edges yellowed with age. They showed a woman, maybe in her 30s, standing in front of the cabin. Mo's cabin, but new, fresh built. The woman was smiling, but there was something guarded in her expression. In another photo, she stood with Mo's grandfather. They looked similar, same nose, same jawline. Siblings, Mo realized. But she'd never known her grandfather had a sister. Beneath the photos were letters, written in a feminine hand on paper that had once been white, but was now cream with age. Mo read them slowly, carefully as the story unfolded. The woman's name was Josephine Kincaid. She was Mo's grandfather's younger sister by 4 years. In 1963, she'd married a man from Knoxville, Mark Hendricks, and by all accounts it had seemed like a good match. But the marriage turned dark. The letters didn't use the word abuse, but the meaning was clear. He controlled everything. He hurt her. She was afraid. In 1965, she'd finally left. Fled in the middle of the night with nothing but a suitcase and her grandfather's address. And Walter had brought her here, to this cabin, to these mountains. He'd built it for her, specifically a refuge where her husband couldn't find her, where she could heal, rest, figure out her next steps. The letters spanned 2 years. Josephine writing to Walter while he was away working, updating him on her recovery, her growing strength. "I cut wood today without crying," one letter said. "The first time I've done hard work without thinking of him. The first time I felt strong instead of weak." Another, "You gave me more than a place to hide. You gave me a place to remember who I was before him, before fear." The last letter was dated June 1967. "I'm leaving tomorrow. Going west to Arizona where Mary lives. I'll start over there, get a job, build a real life. But I'll never forget what you did for me, Walter. You saved my life. This cabin saved my life. I hope someday it can do the same for someone else who needs it." Beneath the letters was a legal document, a deed. The property, officially transferred to Walter Kincaid in 1966, with a handwritten notation at the bottom, "To provide sanctuary for those who need refuge. This land is meant for healing." Mo read through everything twice, then a third time, tears running down her face unchecked. Her grandfather hadn't just built a hunting cabin. He'd built a sanctuary. He'd saved his sister's life. And he'd intended for this place to continue that work. She wasn't rebuilding a cabin. She was continuing a legacy. That evening she showed everything to Shelby. The girl read through the letters carefully, handling them like they were precious. "Your grandfather was a good man." He was. Mo looked at the cabin, seeing it differently now. He built this for his sister, to give her a place to escape, to heal. "And now you're doing the same thing," Shelby finished.
"For me, for other people. For me too," Mo admitted.
"I needed this as much as anyone." They sat quietly for a while, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Then Shelby said, "The town council's not going to like it. If they find out you're planning to make this a place for women to stay." "I know." Mo had been thinking about that since reading the letters. "But it's what the property was meant for. It's in the deed, to provide sanctuary. That's not just a suggestion. That's a purpose." The next day, Mo drove into Cedar Hollow with a plan crystallizing in her mind. She went to the county clerk's office and requested copies of the property records, the deed, everything. The same woman who'd helped her months ago pulled the files. "You getting the property properly transferred to your name?" she asked. "Working on it. Can I get copies of all of this?" "Sure, honey. Take about a week." Mo also stopped at Roy's house. He was in his workshop, building a small bookshelf, and looked up when she knocked. "Mo, what's wrong?" She told him about finding the box, about Josephine, about the deed's language. Roy listened carefully, his weathered face thoughtful. "So that's what he was doing up there all those years." He never said much about it, just that he needed a place in the mountains. Folks assumed it was for hunting. It was for his sister. And he meant for it to be a refuge for others too. And you want to honor that. I do. But I think there's going to be trouble. The town council's already asking questions. If I come out and say I'm making it a sanctuary for women, they'll fight you," Roy finished. "Some will support you, but others won't, especially Vernon Mackey." "Who's he?" "Head of the council. Property developer. Likes things neat and controlled. A place for troubled women in the mountains won't fit his vision for Cedar Hollow." Roy set down his tools. "But you've got right on your side. The deed is clear, and you've been doing this legally. It's your family's land. You're building a single-family residence. You're not running a business. They can't stop you from letting people stay with you. Can they make it hard? They can try. But I'll stand with you. So will Hank and others. This town's got its share of people who know what it's like to need help." He paused. "You ready for this fight?" Mo thought about Josephine, about a woman fleeing in the night with nothing but a suitcase and hope. About Shelby, finding purpose and safety in a half-built cabin. About herself, broken by divorce and rebuilt by manual labor and mountains, and the simple act of creating something real. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." That week, Mo made a decision. She'd finish the cabin completely, not just habitable, but beautiful. She'd make it undeniable. And then she'd present her plans to the town openly and honestly. Let them see what she'd built. Let them understand what it was for. She also did something she'd been putting off. She called her daughter. Nicole answered on the third ring, surprise in her voice. "Mom, are you okay? We've been worried." "I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm in Tennessee, in the Smoky Mountains." "What?" "Why?" Mo took a breath. "I've been rebuilding Grandpa Walter's old cabin, the one he built in the 60s. I've been living here for months, working on it. It's almost done." There was a long silence. "Then you've been living in the woods? For months? Mom, are you—" "I'm not having a breakdown, if that's what you're asking. I'm having a breakthrough." Mo looked at the cabin, solid and real in the afternoon light. "I found out why Grandpa built this place. It was for his sister, your great-aunt Josephine. She was escaping an abusive marriage. He gave her a safe place to heal, and that's what I'm going to do with it now. Make it a sanctuary for women who need somewhere to go." Another silence, longer. Then Nicole's voice softer. "I didn't know he had a sister." "Neither did I, but I found letters, photos, the whole story. And I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my purpose, Mom." Nicole's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm sorry."
For not being there.
"For not understanding. After the divorce, I didn't know how to help you. You couldn't have helped. I had to do this myself. But now I'd like you to come visit. See what I've built. Meet the people who've been helping me." "Okay." Nicole was crying now. Mo could hear it. "Okay, yes. I want to see it. I want to see you." They talked for another hour, really talked, in a way they hadn't in years. Mo told her about Roy and Hank and Shelby, about learning carpentry, about the town council's scrutiny. Nicole told her about her own struggles, her marriage going through a rough patch, her kids acting out, feeling lost in the routine of her life. "Maybe you could come stay for a few days," Mo suggested. "When the cabin's done, just to get away to breathe." "I'd like that," Nicole said quietly. "I'd really like that." After they hung up, Mo sat on the porch and felt pieces of her life realigning, not going back to what they'd been, that life was gone forever, but forming something new, something honest, something built on truth instead of routine. The cabin wasn't just wood and nails anymore. It was a legacy continued. It was proof that broken things could be made whole. It was a promise, to Josephine, to Shelby, to herself, that refuge would always be available for those who needed it. The town council could challenge her. They probably would, but she had history on her side, and purpose, and the kind of determination that only comes from having lost everything and discovered you're still standing. She'd finish this. And whatever came next, she'd face it the same way she'd faced the collapsed cabin that first day, with clear eyes, steady hands, and absolute certainty that this was the work she was meant to do. The notice came on a Tuesday in late October. Mo found it tucked in her truck windshield when she drove into town for supplies, an official-looking document requesting her presence at a town council meeting the following week. Subject: proposed use of property at Old Logging Road, Mile 7. Hank saw her reading it when she came into the store. "They're going to make you defend it." "I know." Mo folded the notice and put it in her pocket. "I'm ready, but was she?" Over the next week, she threw herself into finishing the cabin with an urgency that bordered on obsession. Every detail had to be perfect. If she was going to stand in front of the town council and explain what she'd built, the cabin itself had to be the best argument she could make. Shelby worked beside her every day, sensing the importance. They installed the last of the interior trim. They built shelves and a simple kitchen counter from reclaimed wood. They sanded the floor smooth and applied a clear finish that made the pine glow golden in the autumn light. Roy came by with a donation, a wood-burning cook stove he'd found at an estate sale. "Perfectly sized for the cabin's kitchen corner. Can't have a proper sanctuary without a way to feed people," he said gruffly. The women of Cedar Hollow began arriving too, quietly and unexpectedly. First was a woman named Helen, who ran the church thrift store. She brought quilts, 3 of them handmade and beautiful. "Heard what you're doing," she said simply. "These might be useful." Then came others. A woman named Patricia brought dishes and cookware she'd collected from various sources. Another woman, whose name Mo didn't catch, left a box of linens on the porch, sheets, towels, tablecloths, all clean and neatly folded. With each donation came a story, offered quietly, almost in confidence. My sister needed a place like this once. Didn't have anywhere to go. I left my first husband with just the clothes on my back. Slept in my car for a week. This is good work you're doing. Don't let them tell you otherwise. Mo realized the town wasn't as divided as she'd feared. There were women and some men who understood what she was creating because they'd needed it themselves or known someone who had. The opposition existed, but so did the support, quiet and steady. She also received a package in the mail, forwarded from her old address. Inside was a handwritten letter from a woman named Catherine Hendricks, along with several photographs. My grandmother was Josephine Kincaid, the letter began. She passed away 5 years ago, but she never stopped talking about the cabin in Tennessee, about the brother who saved her life. When I saw the article about you in the regional paper, yes, word has spread that far, I knew I had to reach out. My grandmother would be so proud of what you're doing. She always said that cabin was a sacred place, built on love and meant for healing. Please accept the enclosed donation to help with your work. And know that you're honoring not just your grandfather's memory, but my grandmother's too. The check was for $500, more money than Mo had seen in months. She sat on the cabin's porch and cried, holding the letter and the photos of Josephine as an old woman, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Clearly loved and clearly whole. You did it, Aunt Josephine, Mo whispered. You survived. You built a good life, and now Mo would ensure that others had the same chance. The night before the council meeting, Roy came by with Hank. They'd brought beer, good craft beer from Knoxville, and sat with Mo on the porch as the sun set. You nervous? Hank asked. Terrified, Mo admitted. Good, Roy said. Means you care. But remember, you haven't done anything wrong. You've rebuilt a cabin on your own land. You've done good work, honest work. Whatever you choose to do with that cabin afterward is your business. Vernon's going to argue that running a shelter requires permits, Hank said. That you're creating a business, a public accommodation. I'm not running a shelter. I'm not charging money. I'm just offering my home to people who need a place to stay. Mo took a drink of her beer. How is that different from having house guests? It's not, Roy said firmly. And that's what you tell them. They talked strategy for an hour, then sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge over the mountains. Mo felt grateful for these men, these friends, who'd appeared when she needed them. Roy, who'd taught her everything she knew about building. Hank, who'd been a steady source of support and supplies. They believed in her and in what she was doing. Shelby arrived as the men were leaving. She'd gotten permission from her grandmother to stay the night, the first time she'd slept at the cabin. They made a simple dinner on the wood stove and ate by lamplight at the table Shelby had helped build. I'm coming to the meeting, Shelby announced. You don't have to. Yes, I do, because this place saved me. And if I don't say that, if people don't hear it from someone it actually helped, they won't understand what you're doing. Mo started to argue, then stopped. Shelby was right. The cabin wasn't abstract. It wasn't theoretical. It had already served its purpose, had already been a refuge for a girl who desperately needed one. That testimony mattered, all right, Mo said, but I'll do the talking. You only speak if they ask questions or if I ask you to. Deal. That night, lying in the cabin's small bedroom on a real bed with real sheets, Mo barely slept. She rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd explain. The cabin was more than walls and a roof. It was a continuation of her grandfather's work. It was a place of healing. It was necessary, but would they understand? Or would they see only the liability, the disruption to their neat small town, the complications of having troubled women in the mountains? Morning came cold and clear. Mo dressed carefully in her best clothes, not fancy, but clean and respectable. She looked at herself in the small mirror she'd hung on the wall. Her face was thinner than it had been 6 months ago, tanned from outdoor work, marked with lines that seemed deeper now, but somehow more honest. She looked like a woman who'd done hard work and wasn't finished yet. Shelby wore a dress Mo had never seen before, probably borrowed from her grandmother. She looked young and nervous, but determined. "Ready?" Mo asked. "Ready." They drove into Cedar Hollow together, Roy following in his truck. The town council met in the community center, a plain building next to the church. When Mo walked in, the room was already crowded. Some faces she recognized. Hank, Louise, Helen from the thrift store, Patricia with the dishes. Others were strangers or vague acquaintances. And at the front table sat 5 council members, Vernon Mackey in the center. Vernon was a broad man in his 60s, wearing a suit that looked expensive against Cedar Hollow's general casualness. He had the face of someone used to authority, to being listened to and obeyed. When Mo entered, his eyes tracked her with undisguised skepticism. "Miss Kincaid," he said formally as the meeting was called to order, "thank you for coming. We've asked you here to discuss your activities on the old Kincaid property. Specifically, the structure you've been building. The cabin," Mo said clearly. "I've been rebuilding my grandfather's cabin." "Yes, and we understand you have plans to use this cabin for," he consulted his notes, "providing sanctuary for women in difficult circumstances." "That's correct. That would constitute operating a shelter, which requires specific permits, inspections, and compliance with numerous regulations." Mo stood. She'd been seated, but standing felt necessary. "With respect, Councilman Mackey, I'm not operating a shelter. I'm living in my own home on my own property. If I choose to have house guests, that's my personal business." "House guests?" Vernon's eyebrows rose. "Our information suggests something more organized than casual visits. Your information is incomplete." Mo pulled out the deed copy from her bag, along with Josephine's letters. "My grandfather built this cabin in 1966 for a specific purpose, to provide sanctuary for his sister, who was escaping an abusive marriage. He deeded the property with a notation that it was meant to provide sanctuary for those who need refuge. I'm simply continuing that legacy." She passed the documents to the council. Vernon read them, his expression unchanging. "This notation has no legal binding. It's a sentiment, not a requirement. Perhaps. But it was his intention, and it's mine." Mo's voice was steady. "I've spent 6 months rebuilding that cabin with my own hands. I've learned carpentry from Roy Brenner, worked at the sawmill to afford materials, done everything according to code, even though I'm not technically required to. The structure is sound, safe, and appropriate for residential use. What I do with my residents is my business." A woman on the council, younger than the others, with kind eyes, spoke up. "But if you're housing multiple women, providing services, isn't that different from a simple residence?" "I'm not providing services. No medical care, no counseling, no programs. Just a roof and a safe place to rest. No different from you letting a friend stay in your guest room when she's having marriage trouble. Except I'm making it available to women who don't have friends with guest rooms." Vernon leaned forward. "And what kind of women would these be? What guarantee do we have that you won't be bringing criminal elements into our community?" Before Mo could respond, Shelby stood. "Women like me." The room went quiet. Shelby's voice was shaking, but clear. "My name is Shelby Baker. I'm 16. My mom's an addict. She got arrested this summer. I had nowhere to go, nobody to talk to. I was thinking about running away, maybe hitchhiking to Knoxville, trying to disappear. Then I met Ms. Kincaid. She didn't rescue me. She just gave me something to do, taught me how to build things, let me help with the cabin, showed me I didn't have to be broken forever just because my family's broken." Tears were running down Shelby's face, but her voice never wavered. "You want to know what kind of women she's trying to help? Women like my mom, who need a place to get clean. Women like my grandmother, who's too proud to ask for help, but sometimes needs it anyway. Women like Ms. Kincaid, who lost everything in a divorce and had to start over. We're not criminals. We're just people who fell down and need a hand getting back up." The silence that followed was profound. Mo saw women in the audience wiping their eyes. Even some of the men looked moved. Vernon's face remained carefully neutral, but something had shifted in the room's energy. Mo spoke quietly into that silence. I'm not asking permission to help people. I'm informing you of my intentions. The cabin stands on legally owned property. It's been rebuilt to standard. I'll welcome anyone who needs refuge for as long or short as they need it. I won't charge money. I won't run programs. I'll just offer what my grandfather offered his sister 60 years ago, a safe place to heal. She gathered her papers. You can oppose me if you want. You can make this difficult, but I'll continue regardless. Because it's the right thing to do, and because some things matter more than regulations. Vernon opened his mouth to respond, but the kind-eyed councilwoman spoke first. I move we table this discussion pending a site inspection and review of the property's actual use and impact. Second, another council member said immediately. Vernon looked frustrated but nodded. Very well. We'll schedule an inspection within 2 weeks. Ms. Kincaid, you'll be notified of the date and time. Thank you, Mo said. As the meeting adjourned, people approached her, some to shake her hand, some to offer quiet words of support, some just to touch her arm in solidarity. Vernon left without speaking to her, but she noticed him talking intently with 2 other council members in the parking lot. The battle wasn't over, but she'd made her stand. And judging by the faces of the women who surrounded her, offering hugs and promises of help, she wasn't fighting alone. Roy drove behind her truck as they headed back to the mountains, and Shelby sat beside her, still wiping tears, but smiling too. You think they'll try to shut you down? Maybe, Mo said. Probably, but we've got 2 weeks to make sure there's nothing they can shut down. That cabin needs to be perfect, undeniable. Then let's make it perfect, Shelby said, and for the next 2 weeks, that's exactly what they did. The inspection was scheduled for a Friday in early November. Mo spent the preceding days in a frenzy of final details. Every surface was cleaned, every corner squared. She and Shelby tested the wood stove repeatedly, checked that all the windows opened and closed properly, made sure the door latched securely. Roy came by to verify that everything met code. Even though code wasn't technically required for a single-family residence on private property. Electrical's clean. You did good work on that wiring, he said, flipping switches and testing outlets. Plumbing's basic but functional. Stove installation is textbook. They won't find anything wrong structurally. But will that matter? Mo asked. If Vernon's determined to shut this down, won't he find a way? Roy set down his clipboard and looked at her seriously. He might try, but you've got something more important than perfect construction. You've got purpose, and people see that. Not everyone, but enough. The morning of the inspection, Mo woke before dawn. She'd slept at the cabin every night for the past week, wanting to be there, to inhabit it fully. She made coffee on the wood stove, the ritual comforting in its domesticity. This was a home now, not just a structure, but a place where life happened. Where coffee was brewed and meals were cooked and conversations were held. Where healing could occur. Shelby arrived early, nervous energy radiating from her. What if they find something wrong? What if they say it's not safe? Then we'll fix it, Mo said calmly, though her own stomach was in knots. But Roy checked everything. It's solid. They waited on the porch, watching the logging road. At 9 o'clock sharp, 2 vehicles appeared through the trees. The county building inspector, Teresa Valdez, arrived in an official truck, followed by the fire marshal, Jim Peterson, in his own vehicle. No Vernon, no council members, just the professionals who would assess whether the cabin met safety standards. Teresa climbed out, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with a clipboard and a measuring tape on her belt. Jim followed, older and more weathered, but with kind eyes. They approached the cabin with the assessing gazes of people who'd seen thousands of structures in their careers. Ms. Kincaid, Teresa said, extending her hand. I'm here to conduct the building inspection we discussed. This is Fire Marshal Peterson. Thank you for coming. Mo shook both their hands. Please examine everything. I want to know if there are any issues. Teresa was all business, pulling out a checklist and beginning a methodical tour. She checked the foundation, tested floor joists, examined the roof framing from inside the loft. She inspected the electrical panel, traced wiring, verified grounding. She tested the stove installation, checked clearances, examined the chimney flashing. Jim Peterson did the same for fire safety, smoke detectors, fire extinguisher, safe wood stove operation, clear egress paths. Mo followed them quietly, answering questions when asked, but mostly letting the cabin speak for itself. She watched their faces, trying to read whether they were impressed or looking for problems. Teresa's expression remained neutral, professional. Jim nodded occasionally, seeming satisfied. Shelby stayed on the porch, too nervous to follow. Mo caught glimpses of her through the window, pacing, wringing her hands. This mattered to her too. The cabin had become her refuge, as much as Mo's. After nearly 90 minutes of inspection, Teresa made notes on her clipboard, while Jim tested the smoke detectors one final time. They conferred quietly near the fireplace, comparing observations. Mo's heart hammered. This was it, the moment when months of work would either be validated or torn apart by official criticism. Teresa looked up from her notes. "Ms. Kincaid, could you join us, please?" Mo approached, trying to keep her expression calm. "Of course. I need to ask you some questions about your building process," Teresa said. "You did most of this work yourself?" "Yes, with instruction from Roy Brenner, a retired contractor. He taught me proper techniques. I also worked at the sawmill to learn about lumber and to help pay for materials. And the electrical work? Roy supervised that closely. We followed code even though it wasn't required. Same with the plumbing." Teresa nodded, making more notes. Jim spoke for the first time. "The wood stove installation is excellent. Proper clearances, appropriate chimney height, good draft. Someone knew what they were doing." "Roy showed me how," Mo said. "I wanted it done right. This isn't just a building. It's going to be someone's home." Teresa studied Mo for a long moment, then consulted her clipboard again. "From a structural and safety standpoint, this building passes inspection. Foundation is solid. Framing is sound and properly executed. Electrical and plumbing meet code requirements. Fire safety measures are appropriately installed. The structure is suitable for residential occupancy." Mo felt her knees go weak with relief. She reached out to steady herself against the wall. "Really? Really?" Teresa said, and for the first time she smiled slightly. "I have to say, Miss Kincaid, I've inspected a lot of new construction in my career. This is some of the best amateur work I've ever seen. Whoever taught you knew their craft, and you were clearly an excellent student." Jim nodded his agreement. "I do have a couple of recommendations. Not requirements, just suggestions. I'd add one more smoke detector in the loft area, just for extra safety. And consider a backup heat source, in case you run low on wood during a particularly harsh winter." "I'll take care of both immediately," Mo promised. "I actually have a small propane heater on order." "Good." Jim extended his hand. "No fire safety concerns from my end." "This is solid, safe work." Teresa made final notes on her form, then handed Mo a copy. "I'll file this with the county. You'll receive official documentation within 2 weeks. As far as the building department is concerned, you're clear to occupy and use this structure as a single-family residence." "Thank you," Mo said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." After they left, Shelby burst from the porch where she'd been waiting. "Well, what did they say?" We passed." Mo grabbed Shelby and hugged her tight. "We passed inspection." "It's official." Shelby let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the clearing. They stood together looking at the cabin with fresh eyes. It wasn't just Mo's project anymore, or a structure under scrutiny. It was an officially recognized code-compliant residence. It was real. Roy's truck pulled into the clearing minutes later. He'd stayed away during the inspection, but had been waiting at the bottom of the logging road. "Well," he called as he climbed out. "We passed," Mo said, waving the inspection form. Teresa said it was some of the best amateur work she'd ever seen. Roy's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Course it is. You learned from the best." "I did." Mo walked over and hugged him, surprising them both. "Thank you, Roy, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you. You did the work. I just pointed you in the right direction." He looked at the cabin with obvious pride. "Your grandfather would be proud. This is good, solid building. It'll stand for another 50 years if you maintain it right." "I will." Mo felt certainty settling into her bones. "And now we wait for the council meeting. The inspection passed, but Vernon still has to accept that." "He will," Roy said firmly. He might not like it, but he can't argue with official approval. The structure's sound, it's legal, and you've done everything by the book. Even Vernon Mackey can't fight that. Shelby looked between them. So we're really doing this? The sanctuary's really happening? It's really happening, Mo confirmed. One more meeting to get through, but yes, we're doing this. That afternoon, the three of them sat on the cabin's porch and made plans. Roy suggested connecting with Margaret about insurance. Having proper liability coverage would address one of Vernon's main concerns. Shelby volunteered to help spread the word through school about the sanctuary's purpose, to build community support among younger people. Mo added items to her list: additional smoke detectors, the propane heater, maybe some basic first aid supplies. As the sun set and Roy prepared to leave, he paused by his truck. You know what you've done here, Mo. You've proved something important. That it's never too late to start over. That broken things can be rebuilt. That one person with determination can make a real difference. He climbed into the truck. That's worth more than just a cabin. That's worth everything. After he drove away, Mo and Shelby worked on dinner together, falling into the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over months of working side by side. The cabin felt warm and lived in, the wood stove crackling, the smell of cooking food filling the space. I'm scared about the council meeting, Shelby admitted as they ate. Me too, Mo said honestly. But we've come this far. The cabin's built. It passed inspection. Whatever happens at that meeting, they can't take away what we've already accomplished. What if they vote to oppose it anyway? Then we keep going. This is my property, my home. I'll invite whoever I want to stay here, and there's nothing they can legally do about that. Mo set down her fork. But I don't think it'll come to that. I think enough people understand why this matters. Shelby nodded slowly. Because of people like me. Because of people like all of us, Mo corrected. Everyone who's needed a second chance, a safe place, time to heal. That's most people, if we're being honest. They cleaned up together, then sat by the stove as darkness settled over the mountains. Through the window, stars began appearing, brilliant and clear in the cold November sky. The cabin held them, warm, safe, solid. And in 2 weeks, they'd defend its purpose in front of the whole town. But tonight, in this moment, it was enough to simply exist in this space they'd built together. To know that the structure was sound, officially approved, ready to serve its purpose. The rest would come. But the foundation, both literal and figurative, was firmly in place. Mo looked around the cabin, at the walls she'd raised, the floor she'd laid, the roof that kept out the weather. Every board, every nail, every careful measurement represented not just construction, but transformation. She'd come here broken, and in rebuilding this cabin, she'd rebuilt herself. The sanctuary was ready. And so was she. The town council meeting to determine the cabin's final status was set for the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. In the 2 weeks between the inspection and the meeting, Cedar Hollow seemed to divide along invisible lines. Some people, mostly older women, but also some men and younger folks, began speaking openly about supporting Mo's sanctuary. Others remained skeptical, worried about property values and the kinds of problems that troubled women might bring to their quiet town. Mo didn't try to convince anyone. She simply continued the work, making the cabin more livable, more welcoming. She installed the additional smoke detectors Teresa had recommended. She found a small propane heater at a salvage yard for backup heat. She filled the shelves with donated books and the kitchen with basic supplies. Every detail mattered. The night before the meeting, Nicole arrived from Atlanta with her 2 children. It was the first time Mo had seen her daughter in 6 months, and the reunion was tearful and genuine. Nicole stood in the cabin, turning slowly, taking it all in. "Mom," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "You built this. You actually built this." "I did. With a lot of help. It's beautiful. It's—" Nicole struggled for words. "It's you. The real you. Not the version that was trying to fit into Dad's life or our expectations. This is who you actually are." Her grandchildren, 8 and 10, explored the loft with excitement, claiming it as the best fort ever. Nicole pulled Mo onto the porch where they could talk privately. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not being there. for not understanding. You have your own life, your own struggles. Yeah, but you're my mother. And I let you disappear into the woods because it was easier than dealing with the divorce, with Dad's new life, with all of it. Nicole wiped her eyes. But seeing this, what you've built, what you're trying to do, I'm so proud of you. And I want to help if you'll let me. Help how? I don't know yet. Money when I can. Coming to visit, bringing the kids, telling people about it. Whatever you need. Nicole looked at the mountains, at the clearing, at the cabin glowing with lamplight. This is important, Mom. More important than I think even you realize. You're giving women a second chance. That matters. They stayed up late talking, making plans, reconnecting. And for the first time since the divorce, Mo felt like she had family again. Not the family she'd lost, but something new, something chosen and honest. The meeting room was packed when Mo arrived with Nicole, Shelby, and Roy. More people than had attended the first meeting. Word had spread, and the outcome mattered to more people than just Mo. She saw faces she recognized, and many she didn't. The atmosphere was tense, expectant. Vernon called the meeting to order and read the inspection reports. Everything was in order structurally. The question remained, would the council approve the property's use as a sanctuary? We've received communications from both supporters and opponents, Vernon said. He read several letters, some expressing concern about increased traffic, potential crime, and disruption to the community's character. Others spoke in favor, sharing personal stories of needing refuge, praising Mo's work, arguing that helping vulnerable women was exactly the kind of community value Cedar Hollow should embrace. Then Vernon opened the floor for public comment. A line formed immediately. An older woman spoke first, her voice shaking but determined. My daughter stayed in a domestic violence shelter 30 years ago. It saved her life, but she had to drive 2 hours to get there because nothing closer existed. If Mo's cabin had been available then, it would have made all the difference. We need this. A man in work clothes spoke next. I'm worried about my property value. I'm worried about strangers coming through town. I'm worried about what this opens the door to. No disrespect to Miss Kincaid, but I think this is a bad precedent. One by one, people spoke. The room divided roughly in half, those who saw opportunity for good and those who saw potential for problems. Margaret spoke eloquently about community responsibility. Vernon's allies spoke about practical concerns and legal liability. Finally, Shelby stood. Mo hadn't expected her to speak again. The first time had been so difficult. But Shelby walked to the front with her head high. I know some of you think this sanctuary will bring bad people to Cedar Hollow. I want you to know something. I'm one of those bad people you're worried about. My mom's an addict. My family's a mess. I skip school sometimes. I've made mistakes. Her voice grew stronger. But Ms. Kincaid didn't judge me. She just gave me something to do, something to build. She showed me I could be someone other than my worst mistakes. That's what this sanctuary will do. Give women a chance to be more than their worst moments. If that scares you, then maybe you should ask yourself why. Because it shouldn't. It should give you hope. The room was silent when she sat down. Mo reached over and squeezed her hand. Shelby had said what needed to be said, had represented not just herself, but everyone who would come to the sanctuary in the future. Broken people looking for a chance to rebuild. Vernon cleared his throat. The council will now vote. The question before us: should the town of Cedar Hollow formally oppose the use of property at Old Logging Road, Mile 7, as a residential sanctuary for women? Margaret spoke immediately. I vote no. We should not oppose it. We should support it. One by one, the other council members voted. 2 voted yes, they wanted to oppose the sanctuary. 2 voted no, they supported it. The tiebreaker was Vernon. He sat for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he said, I vote no. We will not oppose the sanctuary. He looked directly at Mo. But understand, Ms. Kincaid, you will be held accountable. Any problems, any complaints, and we will revisit this decision. You're being given trust. Don't violate it. I won't, Mo promised. You have my word. The gavel came down. The decision was final. The sanctuary could proceed. The room erupted. Applause from supporters, grumbling from opponents, but the decision stood. Mo felt Nicole hugging her, Shelby crying on her shoulder, Roy's firm handshake. They'd won. Not completely, not unanimously, but they'd won. The sanctuary was real. Officially, legally, undeniably real, and the work of actually running it could begin. The first snow of winter fell 2 weeks after the council meeting, dusting the mountains with white and making the cabin look like something from a postcard. Mo stood on the porch with her morning coffee, watching the flakes drift down through the bare branches, and felt a contentment she'd never known in her old suburban life. This was hers, really truly hers, built with her own hands, filled with purpose, standing solid against whatever weather came. The first official guest arrived that same afternoon. Her name was Patricia, the same woman who'd brought dishes months ago, and she was 54, recently divorced, with nowhere to go after her ex-husband got the house. She showed up with a suitcase and a haunted look Mo recognized all too well. "I don't know how long I need," Patricia said. "Maybe a few weeks. Just until I figure out next steps." "Stay as long as you need," Mo replied. "Let's get you settled." She showed Patricia the small bedroom, the one Mo had been using until recently. Mo had moved her own things to the loft, preferring the open space and the view of the mountains through the window. Patricia set her suitcase down carefully, as if afraid to take up too much space. "The rule here is simple," Mo said. "Respect the space, respect yourself, and when you're ready, help with the work. There's always something to build or repair or improve. But no pressure. Rest first. Heal first. Everything else comes after," Patricia nodded, tears forming. "Why are you doing this?" Mo thought about all the ways she could answer that question. Because her grandfather did it first. Because she'd been broken and needed to build something. Because Shelby had needed somewhere to go. Because there were too many women with nowhere to turn, and this was something real she could do about it. Because it's necessary, she said finally. "And because I can." Over the following weeks, a rhythm developed. Patricia stayed in the bedroom, slowly emerging from her grief. She helped with meals, learned to use the wood stove, chopped firewood with an intensity that suggested she was working through more than just preparing for winter. Shelby came by most days after school, officially living with her grandmother, but treating the cabin as a second home. Roy stopped by weekly with supplies or just to check on things. Hank sent groceries from the store, refusing payment. Nicole called twice a week, planning a return visit for Christmas. The cabin became what Mo had envisioned, not a formal shelter with rules and schedules, but a refuge. A place where women could breathe, rest, figure things out. Patricia stayed for 6 weeks, then found a job at a diner in the next town over and a small apartment she could afford. Before she left, she hugged Mo tight and said, "You gave me time. That's all I needed, just time to remember who I was before everything fell apart." "You gave yourself that," Mo corrected. "You just needed a safe place to do it." A week after Patricia left, another woman arrived, younger this time, maybe 30. With a black eye, she tried to hide under makeup and a story she wasn't ready to tell. Mo didn't push. She just offered the bedroom, showed her how the stove worked, and let her be. The woman stayed 2 days, then left in the middle of the night. Mo found a note on the table. "Thank you for not asking questions. Thank you for not judging. I'm going to my sister's in Virginia. I'm going to be okay." And that was enough. Not every woman would stay long. Some just needed a night or two, a pause in their flight, a moment to catch their breath. Others might stay longer. The cabin would accommodate whatever was needed. Roy and Mo built a small workshop addition that winter, a place where women could learn basic carpentry and repair skills. Shelby practically lived there, teaching other girls from school who started showing up, kids from troubled homes who needed somewhere to go that wasn't home or the streets. The workshop became an unofficial after-school program, supervised loosely by Mo, but run mostly by the girls themselves. They built birdhouses and small furniture, learning that their hands could create instead of just endure. On a clear day in late December, Mo walked the perimeter of the property, checking fences and thinking about the future. The cabin was full. Patricia had returned for a visit, bringing a friend who needed refuge. Shelby was in the workshop with 3 other teenagers, their laughter carrying across the clearing. Smoke rose from the chimney, steady and sure. The sanctuary was operating exactly as she'd hoped, informally, flexibly, meeting needs as they arose. Her phone rang, Nicole, calling to finalize Christmas plans. "We're definitely coming, Mom. Staying 3 days if that's okay." "The kids are so excited, more than okay. I can't wait to see you. How's it going there?" The sanctuary. Mo looked at the cabin, at the workshop, at the tire tracks in the snow marking all the comings and goings. "It's good. Hard sometimes, but good. Women are finding us, word of mouth mostly. We're helping, one person at a time. I'm so proud of you, Mom. You know that, right?" "I do. And Nicole, thank you for coming that day, for supporting this. It meant everything." After they hung up, Mo stood in the cold for a while longer. 6 months ago, she'd arrived here with nothing but a backpack and a hammer, staring at ruins and wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Now the cabin stood solid, the workshop hummed with activity, and women were finding refuge in a place built specifically to offer it. She thought about her grandfather, about Josephine fleeing in the night with nothing but hope, about the legacy that had been handed down to her without her knowing it existed, about how sometimes losing everything was the only way to discover what you were actually meant to build. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and purple. Inside the cabin, someone started a fire in the wood stove. Smoke rose to join the smoke already rising, and lights came on in the windows, warm against the gathering dark. From the workshop came the sound of hammering, steady and rhythmic, someone building something that would last. Mo smiled and headed back inside. There was dinner to make, stories to hear, lives slowly knitting themselves back together. The work was never finished, would never be finished. That was the point. The sanctuary wasn't a destination, but a process, a continuous offering of space and time and possibility. She'd built more than a cabin in these mountains. She'd built a legacy, a continuation of her grandfather's work, a promise kept across generations. And in building it, she'd rebuilt herself, not back to what she'd been, but forward into something new, something necessary, something real. The door closed behind her, shutting out the cold. Inside was warmth, community, purpose. The wild woman in the woods had become something the town no longer whispered about, but quietly supported, recognizing that what she'd created served a need they'd been ignoring for too long. Cedar Hollow wasn't speechless anymore. They were paying attention, showing up, helping in small ways. And that transformation, from suspicion to support, from judgment to understanding, was almost as significant as the cabin itself. As Mo set the table for dinner, surrounded by women finding their way back to themselves, she understood what her grandfather had known all along. Building a sanctuary wasn't about the wood and nails and perfect angles, though those mattered. It was about creating a space where broken things could be made whole, where time and safety and simple human kindness could work the kind of healing that nothing else could. The cabin would stand through winter, through seasons and years to come. Women would find it when they needed it, would stay as long as necessary, would leave stronger than they arrived. And Mo would be here, offering what her grandfather had offered Josephine, not rescue but refuge, not answers but time, not pity but respect. She'd lost everything to find this purpose. And standing in the warm cabin, surrounded by people who needed exactly what she had to offer, Mo knew she wouldn't trade it for anything she'd left behind. This was home. This was family. This was the work she was meant to do. And the sanctuary would continue, one woman at a time, one day at a time, for as long as it was needed, which she suspected would be for a very long time indeed.